Hello, in this video we're going to derive an expression for the freefall timescale. Now there are a couple of ways to define what exactly that means, and the definition that we're going to focus on for most of this video is that it's the time taken for a particle released from rest to fall onto a much more massive particle under the force of gravity. Now it turns out that that's equivalent to finding the time taken for a massive cloud of gas to collapse to a point under gravity. I'll revisit that idea towards the end of the video and explain what's the connection between this particle falling onto another particle and the collapsing gas cloud. Let's start by defining some key parameters and setting up the problem. So in this little diagram that I've drawn at the top left, we've got a particle of mass capital M, we've got another particle of mass lowercase m, which I'm saying is much less than capital M, and the separation between them is a distance of r. Okay, so we're going to release the smaller particle from a distance of, let's say, r0 from rest and see how long it takes until it touches the larger particle. I'll also note that in reality, both of these particles would move, right? But because we're assuming that small m is much less than big M, we can assume that the larger mass just remains stationary. So the general approach is going to be set up an equation of motion using Newton's second law and solve that to find the required time. So Newton's second law says that resultant force is a mass times acceleration. So the mass times acceleration term, if we apply that to the smaller particle, you get m times d2r by dt squared, right? So second derivative of distance with respect to time, that's acceleration. The force acting here, the force causing the acceleration, is the gravitational force. So we just use Newton's law of gravity. It's going to be minus g times the product of the masses divided by the square of the distance. And the negative sign just means it's an attractive force, right? So the smaller particle is going to accelerate towards the more massive one. So r is going to decrease with time. So this is a differential equation, so we might want to try integrating it to undo some of these time derivatives that we've got. The problem is we can't really integrate the right-hand side with respect to time because it's expressed in terms of the distance r instead of the time t. So let's integrate with respect to r instead and see what happens. Let's also cancel this factor of small m from both sides. So if we do our integration, then we've got the integral of d2r by dt squared with respect to r is the integral of minus gm, and then I'm going to write this as r to the minus 2 to make it easier to integrate with respect to r. Okay, the right hand side here is pretty easy to deal with because you just increase the power of minus 2 to minus 1 and then divide everything by minus 1. So the integrated form of the right hand side is just going to be gm r to the minus 1 plus a constant of integration, which I'm going to call c. The left-hand side, well, we can't deal with that sort of directly because the derivatives are with respect to time, but the integral is with respect to r. But what you can do is write dr in terms of dt as follows. So we can express it as the integral of d2r by dt squared, and then basically divide and multiply by dt, right? So you write it as dr by dt dt. So now this is an integral with respect to time. You can sort of imagine that dt's cancel, which is why it's the same as the previous line. But the advantage of this form is that now your integrand is a function, dr by dt, times by its own derivative, d2r by dt squared. So when you've got that kind of thing, you can use the chain rule in reverse. And if we do that here, we conclude that the integral of the left-hand side is a half of dr by dt squared. All right. So just to convince yourself why that works, you can try differentiating that expression and making sure you get the integrand of the previous line, because when you differentiate this expression, you pull down this factor of 2. The factor of 2 cancels with the half in front, right? So you get dr by dt, but then you've got to times it by d2r by dt squared from the chain rule, right? So that's all consistent, and we have integrated the left-hand side. I'm going to write the right-hand side in terms, well, write it as a fraction now, and so that's gm over r plus our constant. So now we can find the constant of integration using initial conditions. So remember we said we released the particle from rest, which means that dr by dt, all right, which is basically the speed, evaluated when r is equal to the initial distance, which I'm going to call r0. That's 0, right? That's just expressing mathematically the idea that it's released from rest. Substitute that condition into the previous line. Left-hand side becomes 0. Right-hand side is gm over r0 plus c. And you conclude that c has to be minus gm over r0, like that. Okay, so then we can plug our c back into our integrated equation motion. And we conclude that half of dr by dt squared is gm times 1 over r minus 1 over r0, right? I factored out a gm. And you can write that difference of the two fractions as a single fraction by putting both fractions over a common denominator of r0r, right? So the bracketed term becomes r0 minus r over r0r, like that. Okay, so what we want to do is get dr by dt on its own so that we can just directly integrate both sides with respect to time and undo that derivative and find an expression for, it's going to end up as an expression for t in terms of r. Okay, so if I rearrange this, I'm going to get dr by dt. Well, it's going to be, we're going to get a square root, right? So firstly, I'm going to multiply everything by 2 to get rid of that factor of a half. So you're going to get the square root of 2 gm over r0, right? That r0 has come from the bottom of that fraction up there. Then you're going to get another term that depends on r, which is the square root of r0 minus r over r. Okay, now the one other thing we've got to watch out for is I took a square root. Remember, when you take a square root, you've got to have your plus or minus sign. Here, it's really the negative case that we care about, right? Because physically, we know that the velocity of the small particle is going to be directed towards the left here, right? So dr by dt has to be negative because r is decreasing. So we take the negative solution here. Then, okay, so we're going to separate the variables. This is a separable first order differential equation. So if we put all of the r dependent terms on the left, then multiply up by dt, we are going to find that the integral of the square root of r over r0 minus r with respect to r is minus square root of 2 gm over r0. That whole thing is a constant, right? Times just the integral of dt, right? So I've separated the variables, put all of the r's on one side, and then put the dr on one side, the dt on the other side, and integrated the whole thing. Again, the right-hand side here is very easy to evaluate because the integral of dt is just t. The left-hand side is not the easiest integral to do, but I did do another video on that recently. So I'm going to just quote the result that I derived in that other video. If you want to see where it comes from, you can have a look at that video. But I will tell you that the left-hand side integrates to r0 times arc sine of the square root of r over r0 minus the square root of r times r0 minus r, like that. Okay, I'm going to put the constant of integration on the other side. So the other side is going to be minus the square root of 2gm over r0 times time, right, just from the integral of dt, plus some constant of integration. I already used c earlier, so I'm going to call this c2. So then let's think about our initial conditions again. So when t is 0, what's our condition on r? When t is 0, well, r is just equal to r0, right, because we define that to be the initial distance. So if we plug those conditions in, well, what happens to the left-hand side? You get r0 times arc sine of 1. Arc sine of 1 is pi over 2, right? So the left-hand side is r0 pi over 2. This square root term disappears because r equals r0. Then the right-hand side is just going to be c2 because t was 0, right? So the first term on the right-hand side disappears. So we've found our constant of integration. So then I'm going to do a little bit of rearranging, take this line over here, and make t the subject and also put in our constant of integration. you end up with t being equal to the square root of r0 over 2gm times this big bracketed term, which is the square root of r times r0 minus r. Then you get the arcsine term minus r0 arcsine of the square root of r over r0. And then the constant term, which we found was r0 pi over 2, like that. So this is actually a general expression for the time taken to reach any particular distance r. But remember, ultimately what we wanted was the time taken for the smaller particle to fall onto the bigger particle. So we're just going to set r equal to 0, right? So when r is 0, what's going to happen? Well, the first term disappears because there's a factor of r in that square root. The second term also disappears because arcsine of 0 is 0, and so you're just left with the constant term at the end, right? So when r is 0, you get t, which I'm going to call tff. This is now the free fall time, right? It's going to be r0 pi over 2 times the square root of r0 over 2gm. And since there's already an r0 and a 2 inside the square root, we may as well put this r0 and this 2 into the square root, and you end up with pi multiplied by the square root of r0 cubed, right? It's cubed because this r0 is the square root of r0 squared. So you get an extra r0 squared in your square root, and then you get, similarly, by the same logic, you get 8gm on the bottom. So there is an expression for the free fall timescale in the case of a particle falling onto a much more massive particle. So just to finish off, what's the relevance of this free fall timescale to the collapse of a cloud of gas? So consider that you've got a spherical gas cloud with a radius of r0, and let's say it has an initial density of ρ0. All right. Now, if you just allow this thing to collapse under gravity and consider the motion of a particle sitting just on the outer layer of the cloud, right? So Gauss's law tells us that the force that that particle experiences is equivalent to the force that you would get if you just condensed all of the mass of that cloud down and put it at a point in the middle, right? In other words, the force of a spherically symmetric mass distribution is equivalent to the force of a point mass just sitting at the center of that mass distribution. Okay, and so if we were to come up with an expression for the total mass of that cloud, which is just density times volume, right? So the volume of a sphere is 4/3 pi r cubed, so 4/3 pi r0 cubed multiplied by the density ρ0. The force experienced by that red particle at the edge there is equal to the gravitational force that you would get between that particle and a larger particle with that mass there. Now, because the strength of gravity decreases with distance, as the cloud collapses, you don't get any particles sort of crossing over, right? And so that particle on the outside is always going to remain on the outside, and it's always going to see that same total amount of mass interior to it. So we can just take that mass, substitute it into our free fall timescale, and we'll get an expression that tells us how long this cloud of gas will take to collapse. Okay, so if we do that, we get free fall timescale is equal to pi times, probably the easiest thing to do is note that in the square root we've got r0 cubed over m, right? So r0 cubed over m, that particular combination, by rearranging our equation for capital M there, what's that going to be? It's going to be 3 over 4 pi ρ0, right? So if you just substitute that into our free fall timescale, you get 1 over 8g multiplied by that whole fraction that we just derived, 3 over 4 pi ρ0. If we just simplify the numerical constants, we can also put the pi into the square root as a pi squared. Then you end up with 3 pi on the top because pi squared cancels with the pi on the bottom. Your numerical factor on the bottom is 32, and then you've got g ρ0. So this is actually an estimate of the time taken for a cloud to collapse under gravity, and so this is relevant to things like star formation, and you can use this, for example, to get a rough estimate for the gene's mass.